Hi everyone, welcome to today's lesson. This lesson is intended for fourth graders, but anyone is welcome to join. My name is Amber Smith, and I'm a fourth grade teacher at Finch Elementary in Spokane, Washington. Today, we're going to be doing a geometry review. We're going to be talking about triangles and quadrilaterals and how we classify them. So get a piece of paper, a pencil, and your fabulous brain, and let's get started. All right, today we're going to talk about classifying triangles and quadrilaterals. So this is a geometry concept, and when we classify, we're talking about how do we describe triangles and quadrilaterals so that we better understand them. And we describe them by some different attributes, and attributes just means what are we describing them by? So what are some things that we can categorize them by? So today we're going to start with triangles, and then we're going to move into some work with quadrilaterals. All right, so the thing you have to remember about triangles is that we can classify them by their angles and we can classify them by their sides. So every triangle can have two names. So let's look at the first name. And the first name is when we're talking about the angles of a triangle. So the angles meaning those corners. So let's draw some different examples of this to help you better understand. So the first one is an obtuse triangle. And an obtuse triangle has one obtuse angle. So if you remember angles, obtuse means it's bigger than 90 degrees. So bigger than that L-shaped corner, like the corner of a book. So it has one obtuse angle and two acute angles. Those are smaller than 90 degrees. That's how you classify it by the angle. So if it has one obtuse angle, it's going to be an obtuse triangle. The next one is an acute triangle. And an acute triangle has three acute angles. So every corner is less than 90 degrees. There are no L shapes. So it is classified in that way by the angles. And then the last one is called a right triangle. So that little square in the corner means that is a right angle in the corner, meaning it has that perfect L shape. So these are the three ways that you can classify a triangle based on its angles. One is if it has one obtuse angle, it's an obtuse triangle. If it's an acute triangle, it will have three acute angles. And then if it's a right triangle, it will have one right angle. The next way that you could classify triangles are by their sides. So we have three ways that we can do that as well. So our first one is an equilateral triangle. And an equilateral triangle has three equal sides. All the side lengths are the same length. And I drew this little line symbol in here because that just means that all those sides are the same length. So whenever you see that, they're trying to tell you that sides are the same length. So equilateral has three equal sides. An isosceles triangle would have two equal sides. So I can show it with two equal sides with those lines. So two equal sides. And then the very, very last one is called a scalene triangle. And a scalene triangle has no equal sides. I always think they're kind of tricky to draw. So there's an example of a scalene triangle. None of the sides are equal length. So remember that there are two ways to classify triangles. One is by the angles. So you've got obtuse, acute, and right. And one is by the sides, equilateral, isosceles, and scalene. Let's look at a few examples and let's see if you can help classify them. So here are three triangles that we're going to look at today and try to classify them. So the first one, let's look at the green triangle and let's look at the angles on that triangle. So are you noticing any obtuse or right angles on that triangle? So I don't see any obtuse or right angles. All of those angles are less than 90 degrees. So this is an acute triangle. Now let's look at the sides. I'm noticing that it has these marks, meaning they're equal. So this is an equilateral triangle. So this is an acute equilateral triangle. All right, let's look at that red triangle now, and let's look at its angles. I'm noticing that little symbol down in the bottom corner that means right. So this is a right triangle. And the sides, I'm looking at them and I'm not noticing anything that shows that they have equal lengths. So this would be a scalene triangle. This is a right scalene triangle. All right, let's look at that blue triangle and let's look at the angles on there. I'm noticing this one right here is kind of big. It looks bigger than a 90-degree angle. So that is an obtuse triangle. And then I'm noticing that it's showing that two of the sides are equal on this one. So this would be known as an isosceles triangle. So an obtuse isosceles. So lock those terms in your head. Let me go back to that page. That you have angles, obtuse, acute, and right. And then for side, you have equilateral, isosceles, and scalene. So it takes a while to memorize these, and you need to look at them a few times to lock it in your brain, but it's definitely a good idea so that you can better classify triangles. All right, let's jump into quadrilaterals, and let's talk about how we classify them by their different attributes, or the things that we use to describe them. So a quadrilateral, your first clue is quad, meaning four. They always have four sides, but there are several different types of quadrilaterals, and we classify them into these different types. So the first one that I want to talk about today is called a trapezoid, and I want to draw you a few examples of trapezoids. So you've probably seen this, and instantly in your head you're like, that's what I always think about when I see a trapezoid. But this is actually a trapezoid too. As is this. This is my rectangle. I'm trying to get it as nice as I can. And this. All of these would be considered trapezoids. So the definition of a trapezoid is that it has one set of parallel lines. So parallel meaning that there is one set of lines that run exactly going the same direction as each other, and they're never going to cross. So on this one, these ones that I just marked, those are parallel lines. That's a symbol that we can use to show parallel lines, by the way. On this rectangle over here, here's a set of parallel lines, although it does have another set, doesn't it? And then these are parallel lines. And on this one, these are parallel lines. And you're probably saying, hey, it's got another set of parallel lines too. We're going to get to that in just a minute. So remember, a trapezoid has exactly one set of parallel lines. It has to have one set. Can it have more? Yeah, but it has to have at least one set of parallel lines. Okay, let's go to the next quadrilateral, and let's talk about how it's a little bit different. This one's called a parallelogram. So a parallelogram, let me draw you a few examples of those. So again, this one that looks like a rectangle. And how about this one that looks like a square? And this one, like if you're pretty familiar with your different geometric figures, you're probably thinking, I know that one definitely is a parallelogram. So the definition of a parallelogram is it has two sets of parallel sides. So the difference between a trapezoid and a parallelogram is a trapezoid has to have one, parallelogram must have two. So let's mark the parallel sides on these. So these across from each other are parallel, and these are parallel. These ones are parallel, and this pair is parallel. So I'm drawing the different symbols to show that they're parallel. It's a way to mark it. And then these two across from each other are parallel. So these are all parallelograms because they have two sets of parallel lines. So remember the difference between a trapezoid having one and a parallelogram having two. All right, so let's jump into another quadrilateral, and that is a rectangle. So a rectangle is interesting, and you're very used to rectangles looking like this. I'm going to put these little marks in the corner. Can you remember from when we talked about triangles what that means? So a rectangle still meets the definition of a trapezoid and a parallelogram, but it has to have right angles. So all of its corners are right angles. They all have that perfect L shape. So this one here, which you're used to calling a rectangle, meets that definition. It has the 4 right angles. And then this one here, which you're like, hey, that's a square. It's also a rectangle because it has 4 right angles. Every corner has a right angle. So it also meets the definition of those 4 right angles. So it's a parallelogram with 4 right angles. Okay, one more for you, and that is the square. So the square is probably the most special of the quadrilaterals of all because it is the only one that meets every attribute. So the difference between a square and a rectangle is a square is just like a rectangle. It's also a parallelogram. It's also a trapezoid. But the only difference is it has 4 equal sides. So that's why I drew that symbol there showing that it has 4 equal sides. A rectangle does not have to have 4 equal sides, but a square must have those 4 equal sides. So 4 equal sides and 4 right angles. So the square is special because it is a quadrilateral. It is a trapezoid because it has at least 1 set of parallel lines. It's a parallelogram because it has 2 sets of parallel lines. It's a rectangle because it's a parallelogram with 4 right angles. And it's a square because it also has 4 equal sides. So a very, very special shape. Okay, let's do a little bit of practice of classifying quadrilaterals now. So I have these 4 shapes on my page, and I want us to talk about each one and see if you can help me classify them. So let's look at this one right here. So think about the attributes of this. So look at the markings on it. So it has 1 set of parallel sides. That's what this means. So this is a trapezoid. All right, let's look at this one over here. So this one has some different markings. It has a set of parallel sides there. And this means the other 2 sides are parallel. So can you remember what that is called? It's a parallelogram. 2 sets of parallel sides. Quadrilateral with 2 sets of parallel sides. Let's look at this one down here. So this one, it's a parallelogram, but it also has 4 right angles. So what is this one called? This one is called a rectangle. And then this very last one over here, the very special one, it meets all the definitions. And it has 4 equal sides. So it is a square. So I hope you have enjoyed this geometry review. The hardest part of geometry is just recognizing all the vocabulary and the attributes of the different shapes that help us classify them. Once you get that down, I think geometry gets a lot easier. But it does take time to practice and to memorize those things so that you can have really good conversations in geometry. Thank you for learning with me today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.